You know that saying, pay peanuts, get monkeys? Well, we're not about to start calling anybody in our business monkeys, but actually when we look at what value we're providing to people, pay isn't everything when it comes to recognizing our people and making them feel like they're really valued in our workplace. But how we pay people, how we reward people, and also how we recognize them is actually one of those mega tools you can use at work. And I think it's often understated in terms of its importance that it can have for people in the workplace, literally around whether they feel valued and acknowledged for the contribution they've been making on a day-to-day level or on a particular project. And these days, we really do need to have some structure around how we're rewarding and recognising people in our workplace. Again, it's about that inclusivity that inclusion we've spoken about prior. You know, we need to make sure these things are very clear and they're very transparent with everyone, so there's parity around what these things look like. But this is such a big topic that today, Kirsten and I have broken it into two areas. Kirsten will be talking to you and sharing some ideas and tips around reward and recognition. And I'm going to be talking to you around packages and benefits, which is one of the foundational tools that we need to have in our toolkit around reward and recognition.
Reward and recognition is something that's very, very close to my heart. I remember in one of the roles that I've had in the past, and at the time, I didn't drink wine. And I know Sarah's going to laugh now because I do drink wine now. But back then, I actually drank cocktails and champagne or bubbly, and with a bit of cider in there. And I remember doing really, really well. And turning up to work the next day and seeing a bottle of wine on my desk. And I looked at it and I went, oh, this is cool. Thanks. You know, really appreciate that. And then I just turned to my colleagues and said, does anybody want this bottle of wine? I don't drink it. And, you know, in that moment, and it's always stayed with me, I thought, how well do you actually know me? You know, and I knew there was a cupboard that had gifts for ad hoc, you know, reward and recognition, that and movie tickets. But which is great, don't get me wrong. But what was the most important part that was missed was that gift wasn't for me, it was just what was easy to give. Whereas if you make things meaningful, all of a sudden people go, you know what, you've got me, you understand me, you understand the value I bring here, and you've taken the time to get to know me. So reward and recognition, it's about the formal and the ad hoc or the informal. Now, one of the key things, as you've probably just noticed, is that if you're doing reward and recognition and you're doing it really well, you'll get traction in that sense of belonging and engagement. Get it wrong and make it too generic and vanilla, then it actually becomes a bit of a non-event. So here's some tips for you. Have a look at your reward and recognition scheme, and have a look when you're looking at the ad hoc side of things, look at what you've actually got. How well do you know your team members? Because for reward and recognition to be effective, it needs to be, number one, meaningful to that person. It also needs to be specific to an actual event, which is great to be able to say that, you know, and say congratulations and thank you for X, Y, and Z, because then they know exactly what they're getting that recognition for. The next part is it has to be timely. And what I mean by timely is don't do it a month later. Make sure you do it on the time, right there in that moment or within that 24 hours. And the other side of this is making sure that you're consistent. So what you do for one team member when there's a certain thing that's being rewarded for, you need to make sure that you're consistent across your team. So if someone else does a similar thing, that you reward them in the way that is meaningful to them. Now, for reward and recognition to be effective, you need your CE, your executive, and all your leaders on board with this. We need to make sure that all your reward and recognition is aligned to your ways of working, with your values and your belief system, but also it needs to come back in that you're really celebrating, you know, those milestones, that things that people are going to get really, really excited about. So please remember, as you're going through, do a bit of a brainstorm, write down all the the different formal reward and recognition initiatives you have in place, ad hoc ones that you have in place, and then this is a little exercise or a little practical hack for you, is actually go to your team, give them different categories or different milestones, and actually say to them, what sort of reward and recognition would you like when we hit this type of milestone? You're not guaranteeing anything, but what that does when you collect that bit of information in, all of a sudden it makes sure that you reward and recognize in a meaningful way, so that you actually get that extra sense of belonging from that team member, and they are actually inspired to do greater things.
And I really like that, being inspired to do greater things, that Kirsten's just been talking about, because that's that value, it's that motivation to do one thing more. And we need to make sure, when we're looking at creating that motivation to do one thing more, that we take care of some of those foundational needs of people. And yes, that is in the form of how we pay people. And so if we think about, people really wanting to rise to the occasion and do one thing more, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a great one to reference. Financial safety sits really nicely in those first two tiers on Maslow's triangle, around the safety needs that somebody actually has before they can excel, like Kirsten's been talking about, and we can use those amazing reward and recognition techniques that you've got in your business. Now, some thoughts around paying people. Kirsten and I are huge believers in paying fair. Now, that looks different in every industry and every role, but the real take home we'd like to share with you is about knowing your market. So knowing what the role is that you're recruiting. This is where the role clarity and being very clear about what you're recruiting and the process you go through comes into play, because then you'll understand and you'll be able to go out and get information around what that role should be being paid. Now, we're not saying, and it might be your philosophy in your business to pay at the top end of the market, that's fine. But we need to pay fair for a role. We need to make sure that we're taking care of that financial security that that person needs. So if you don't know what that looks like, Kirsten, I would love you just to go out and get the advice. There are lots of remuneration providers, lots of people who can help you with that. So get the right information. And we also need to be really clear about how we are increasing salaries as well, or wages, as we're moving along. And I know lots of businesses have different schemes around what that looks like, and whether you're using the wage index or another measurement or a CPI in terms of offering increases, it's around being very clear about what that looks like. Again, it's that clarity of around what's meaningful to me. So how do I get a pay increase? Does it happen annually at CPI time, or does it happen every 6 months? What do those parameters look like? And how do I know what I'm going to get? Gone are the days of those 7 and 10% increases in most businesses, and actually post challenging environments, there may not even be increases. But what does that look like, and how clear is that information for me? Again, it's coming back to my financial security around what that's going to look like. And also, we want to make sure you're making the right decisions. So when there's a wee story I'm just going to very quickly share with you, is there was a position I knew of that was being recruited. It was a head of sales position. And it was actually just a fixed term role that was being filled in for a parental leave scenario. And phenomenal candidate came into the picture, progressed and all the rest of it. And again, bearing in mind it's for a fixed term period, and often these types of roles, we have to pay more because it's for a shorter period of time. And actually the business that had incredible values and did some amazing things went in with a really low offer. And so we have to think about what that looks like from a value perspective, and also that, again, that financial security, but also what it does reputationally. The business had been talking a lot about the way they did things around here and their culture and their values. And then they went in with this really low offer to someone who's in head of sales. And there just isn't that marry up. So do have a think about what you're offering and how that's going to impact, your brand and your reputation as well. But also, if you're having people in your business with really, really low salaries, you need to make sure that everything else in your business is in tip-top shape. There are some businesses that can keep people because they have absolutely everything else dialed up and on point. There's learning opportunities. there's fulfillment, there's all of the other things that are going on for people in the role, and they do pay lower salaries. But we have to be very careful about how we're using pay, and actually always making sure we take care of that person's financial security when we're thinking about pay in the workplace.
So there you have it, pillar 3 and pillar 4. Now, when we have a look at pillar 3, we looked at reward and recognition, informal and ad hoc. And then Sarah's just taken you through pillar 4, which is looking at making sure that our packages and our benefits are fair. Next episode, we're going to focus on the last 3 pillars of an employee value proposition. And then in the last episode, we're going to bring it all together and look at culture change and how this all comes into effect when you're going through culture change. We hope you enjoy those exercises, and in the next week, go through and actually overlay what you currently have in your business with the tips, the insights, and the exercises Sarah and I have just shared with you.